Up next, we have Gwen, who's going to share her testimony. Gwen actually is pastor on staff with Harvest Rock Church in Pasadena, California. She's executive pastor there. She also oversees the Hope Center and inner healing and counseling ministries. Gwen serves on the board of directors for Embracing Life Ministries and has received training with Bethel's Sozo Ministry, Elijah House Ministries, Leanne Payne's Pastoral Care School, and Desert Stream Ministries. Gwen has received her Master of Divinity from Fuller Theological, a Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership from Regent University, and her Doctorate of Practical Ministry from the Wagner Leadership Institute. Gwen's written work includes More Glory, God's Healing Voice for Shame and Self-Hatred, Leadership for Small Group Healing Ministry, and God's Original Design, Fighting the Freedom to Lead. Welcome, Gwen. It's so delightful for you to come on stage and join us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate that you've asked me to be a part of Restore to Hope. I loved it. I've attended the conference. And so, Anne, thanks for letting me be here.
What a delight to have you. Thank you so much, Gwen.
Thanks.
Take it away.
I want to just share my testimony and affirm so much of what I just heard Linda speak about in regards to the healing process and working through same-sex attraction. I, like many people, perhaps grew up in a Christian household. I grew up with parents who knew the Lord. And when I grew up in the church, nobody felt the way that I did in the era, in the time that happened. And so I kind of hid that. I pushed that down when I began to notice that happen. I had a disconnected relationship with my mom. We did not understand each other really well. And after a season of time, I did shut the door on that relationship. I just could not relate to her. I really struggled in feeling a sense of acceptance from her. And as a consequence, really struggled to accept myself. My father was home, but he was disconnected. I didn't see him a lot. And I grew up in a military household. And that for me meant that we moved every 2 or 3 years. It did not have a constancy of friends. We did not live near family. And so I began to live this very emotionally disconnected life. And the group of people around me, which was my immediate family, were disconnected relationships for me in so many different ways. And so having that sense of disconnection and that sense of inner disconnection from not really accepting myself or the good of what it meant to be a girl or woman, I really began to have this internal sense that I wasn't like my peers. And so as I grew up through puberty, I hid that. I did not talk about it. The church didn't talk about it. And that became a place where I really started to get disconnected. But like many people in the mainline denomination, I had gone through a confirmation class. I had accepted a relationship with Jesus. While I didn't fully understand the scope of that, it was important to me. It felt real to me. It was meaningful. And so I had that constancy of my life. I read a chapter in the Bible every day growing up, high school through college. And so I knew my New Testament rather well. And as I read my New Testament, I felt very convicted about this disconnect between what I read and how I felt. And that got harder and harder for me. And I ended up starting to question how to live that way, wishing to be different than the way that I felt. And that was difficult. I finished college. I interned with my pastor at the time, thinking about going to Bible school. And I remember in that summer that I did that, I remember God coming to me and I felt like he held up this mirror to my face and he said to me, "Hey, I want to talk to you about you." And I thought, yeah, I don't want to have that conversation. And so I just quit. I quit looking at Bible college. I actually eventually quit going to church. I felt like I couldn't resolve my internal conflict with and my feelings with what I felt like I read in the Word. And so I walked away from that. I began to explore this life. I dabbled in same-sex attraction relationships. I began to have more and more lesbians in my life. And as that happened, God bless this person who at that time said to me, "Hey, if you're not a lesbian, what are you doing hanging out with a bunch of lesbians?" And so that really held up a whole new mirror to me that while I felt like I was hiding, truthfully, I wasn't. And I began to confront actually how I felt, and began to actually start to move more and more towards that world of same sex attraction. Consequently, I also struggled tremendously with depression. And in that season of my life, while I went to counseling and I talked about being same-sex attracted, it wasn't a way to fix that for me. It was actually the way to address how depressed I felt, how little self-identity I had, and how it was creating such a deep depression in who I was. And counseling in that season of my life made me realize how much my past and the growing up, the wounds and the deficits, the perceptions of my childhood were affecting my present day reality, were affecting how I saw myself, and really affecting how I felt. And so it gave me a great perspective. Counseling really helped in that season of my life, but it wasn't a fix or a cure. And I ended up turning into that life. I explored a relationship with another woman. And as I began to move more and more toward that, and had that relationship, I thought to myself at that time, like, isn't this my answer? Aren't I supposed to feel better? Like I have crossed this boundary and I'm having this relationship with this other woman. And no matter how emotionally it felt like it was meeting a deep emotional need, the dissonance and the disconnect inside of me hadn't gone away. And I didn't feel aligned in it, and I couldn't accept it as an identity. And I really struggled in that season, and I felt really quite disillusioned. And I thought, well, I thought this was supposed to be my answer. I'm so disappointed that it wasn't. And I'm so disappointed that I'm still so unhappy and that I'm not having that sense of fulfillment. And in that moment, I really felt like the Lord came and confronted me graciously in that season of my life. And I remember standing, feeling like in my spirit, I was standing on the edge of this precipice. And the Lord said to me, "Do you understand the path you're on leads to death?" And I felt like I looked straight down off the edge of this cliff into darkness. And the Lord's kindness in that moment, he wasn't being condemning, he was inviting me to walk in a new way. And I realized that everything I was doing was contributing to this sense of dying internally. And so I began a new relationship with the Lord. I actually rededicated my life in that season. And I did it unconditionally, because I thought, I don't, I choose Jesus. I choose Jesus alone. I know that he is a reality, and I choose that unconditionally. I didn't make conditions on healing. I didn't try to do that, but I did say, Lord, I need your help. And I began this process of healing. And in that season, I realized that the chaos I had felt internally all of my life was gone. I hadn't realized that the Lord, when I accepted him, had come in and ended that internal chaos. And I also felt that significant sensation of a weight lifting, like I didn't realize I had carried all of this weight on me and I no longer had it. Today, we talk about those sensations in inner healing ministry as kind of a deliverance, the sensation that something is left and the presence of the Lord has come. And I feel like I really experienced that. And I hung on to the verse from Luke chapter 1, verse 37, where the Lord says, "Is anything too difficult for God?" Because it felt impossible for me. It felt impossible that this would change in my life. And yet I knew the scripture said, "Is anything too difficult for God?" And so I hung on to that as my life verse in that season. And I really began what was a long journey, a process of healing. The conviction in my heart that the Lord anchored me in, that I really did not want to live in my past life, became the anchor when temptation came my way, which it did. The temptation came, but it anchored me in this desire to live whole. It anchored me in the desire to not go back. And as I progressed through this season of healing, I found tremendous help in inner healing programs. I did a lot of work with Elijah House in that season, which was really helpful to me. I came across Desert Stream Ministries and did training with them. I had gone to an Exodus conference when Exodus was still around, and it gave me context for my life, for things that happened to me. I realized I was not the only person that this has happened to. And I also feel like it is also true that a pastor that I shared my story with in that season, when I felt so broken and so disconnected, said to me, "You know what? That's not how I see you." And it was such a life-giving response that I didn't have to see myself that way, and that a community of people could help me begin to understand who I really was as a woman in Jesus. I think for me in this season of my life, where I am very different stage of life, I don't struggle with that temptation. I listened to Linda's talk on all of these common things and thought, oh my gosh, that's so true. I feel like this is really so much of my own journey and story that she's talked about. But I feel like the verse I hang on today as a leader in the church is really 1 Corinthians 4:20, where Paul says, you know, our gospel isn't just words, it's actually the power to transform. And so I feel like this is what I hang on to today. This is what I encourage people about, that the gospel that we have is transformative, you know, to our soul, to the wounds of our soul. And that through the power of the Spirit who lives within us, that change and that life of transformation as we walk it out over time is actually very real. And so I just wanted to encourage you with that today. I just wanted to share that testimony of my life and the work that the Lord has done in me. And I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to share that with you today. So thank you.
There's a little delay, so I'm sorry about that. Thank you for your patience as I came back on screen. Thank you so much for sharing your testimony, Gwen. I am so grateful to who you are as a woman today, of persevering through the multiple challenges and the fact that you lean into Jesus. Those are good gifts. Thank you, sister, so much for sharing your testimony. It's been
And
an
thank
honor
you.
having
And
you.
I just want to say thank you to you and to the work of Restored Hope Network that I refer so many people to now in the church these days. So thank you for all the work you guys are doing.